Okay, I think we're ready to go. If my esteemed colleague Wakilla will go ahead and share his screen.
Cool. Let me know if you can see the screen. Give me a thumbs up.
We can see the screen.
Cool. All good.
Okay, I think it's time to get started. Welcome, everyone. A warm welcome from the London Football Association, and welcome to a conversation with London FA, creating an inclusive environment. See, I'm trying to do that without having to say next slide, Akula. So I need you to be.
I know.
Yeah.
There we go.
I did it well.
Okay. Okay, now.
Okay. So just a bit of housekeeping. Can everyone please put their microphones on mute? Also, keep your cameras off if you aren't being interviewed. That's just to help with the bandwidth and internet connection, which has been amazing today, right? Yes. Please, if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat. This session is being recorded for training and monitoring purposes. Not just joking, but this session is being recorded and the recording has started. So please bear that in mind. And we want your voices heard, but please be respectable when asking your question, but it should go without saying. Okay, so the format today, we have 7 guests. I'll be doing a brief introduction for each of them. Then we'll be going through a Q&A session with the relevant member of London FA staff, asking that panelist a couple of questions. And then I believe at the end, we'll have an open Q&A forum. Have I got that correct, everyone? Is that correct? Yes, I'm getting a lot of head nods. So that's fantastic. Okay, so first up, we'll have Chloe Morgan. Chloe Morgan will be asked for questions by Shannon. Brief introduction for Chloe Morgan. And Chloe, if I got anything wrong, I did not type this. Just joking. So Chloe is the current #1 goalkeeper for Crystal Palace Women in the Women's Championship, which is excellent. I referee in that competition as well. Fantastic competition. Prior to this, Chloe was with Spurs Women from 2014 to 2020, seeing them into their first year in the WSL. Alongside playing, Chloe is the coach for Gold Diggers FC. Okay? And she's a women and non-binary club based in London, as well as a full-time civil litigation lawyer for a London firm. Chloe clearly is someone you should not be messing with, and what a fantastic CV that is. So we'll hand that over to Shannon, who will have some fantastic questions for Chloe to answer. And Chloe, I am very much looking forward to this part of the show.
Yeah, so I'm afraid, Chloe, you got me again, as like the 100 FC as well. We seem to be having a lot of conversations together. Is there anything else you wanted to add on top of that about just what you've been up to recently? Because I know you've had a few new bits coming through.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's been a busy couple of weeks. So sort of heading towards the end of the season now, and I thought, do you know what, I've not got enough on. I tell you what I can do. I'm going to open up and start a women's coaching company for girls, women, and non-binary players as well. So I think I just wanted to kind of open up that sphere. It wasn't really something that I was seeing was done a lot. I think the focus was predominantly with boys and men. So yeah, I've launched that this week. I'm sort of looking forward to sort of where it takes me.
Yeah, no, I've been seeing some really good stuff on that, so it looks really good. And that kind of feeds into the first kind of question I've got for you, which is so it seems to be that with goalkeeping, even more so than like outfield players, that there's a real lack of visibility for women and non-binary role models. In your experience, have you seen a change in this throughout your career or through anything you've been working with? And should there be more that the FA are doing to support women and non-binary people get into the goalkeeping pathways?
Yeah, I think you're completely right. I don't think there are an abundance of gay and LGBT people and people of colour in the goalkeeping sphere just generally. And I think when you kind of look at the environment that football has historically had, I don't think it's always been a very welcoming environment. And I think, I mean, you only have to look at the kind of things that are going on now and all the social media things that happen with the boycott, and it's sometimes I think not the most easy environment to get into, and I think that has probably held a lot of people back from getting into coaching, especially women. And I think probably more so, especially women of colour as well. So I think I'm now starting to see a bit more of a change. I mean, I know that St Mary's have just opened up their high performance goalkeeping centre, which is amazing. And that sort of caters, I think, towards more kind of the elite pathway and trying to get more goalkeepers, young goalkeepers going through the ranks and getting up into the national leagues, the championship, the WSL, which is great. But I think there's still a bit of a gap at the sort of lower end of the pyramid, kind of the grassroots level and some of the national leagues as well. So yeah, I think that definitely needs addressing.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you on that one. And then, do you think there are many barriers facing women from different ethnicities entering football? And are there things that clubs and county FAs can be doing to help support those women entering into football?
Yeah, I think from the FA's perspective, I think they are starting to take goalkeeping and women's goalkeeping as a bit more of a priority. I think, like I said, with the St Mary's High Performance Centre, I think is amazing. But again, I think there probably needs to be a little bit more funding at grassroots level, because I think actually engaging girls and women in the community at a very basic level, I think, and trying to get them just to enjoy goalkeeping, because I think there's a bit of a stigma attached to being in goal, I think, because not a lot of people know much about it, and they don't want to go into a position and then make a mistake. And it's a very high pressurized environment being a goalkeeper, and it's quite isolating. So I think the majority of people would probably say, I'll go outfield. So I think if you start to actually take away the stigma of going in goal and encourage people to enjoy it, learn techniques, learn what to do in goal, and then give them the kind of skills and confidence to put their hands up and say, I want to go in goal today, then I think that will start to filter through into the higher levels and get more girls and women involved in goalkeeping generally.
Yeah, no, brilliant. And also, obviously you've got your lawyer background and educated in law. Do you find that your knowledge of that can sometimes shape how you approach these kind of things? And does it help you to support those ideas of inclusivity in the environments you work with in football, or vice versa?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot of kind of transitions that you can or a lot of similarities that you can take away from football and things that I then use in my legal career. I mean, there are so many transferable skills. I mean, I know it's a bit of a buzzword, but, communication and teamwork and resilience and decision making and things like that. And, for me as a football player in that kind of role that I have, I'm fairly senior. I'm sort of coming towards the end of my career. I can kind of share my experience with the younger players, but I suppose taking that into the legal sphere, I'm still generally quite a junior solicitor in my firm in comparison to the partners and things. So I take a lot of what I actually learn on the field and that resilience, and even doing interviews and things like that, and speaking about against LGBT issues or racist issues and things like that. You can actually take that into your legal career, and I found that it's actually helped me, and especially when I have court hearings and things like that, I don't get half as nervous now.
That's good to hear. I could imagine it also in your football career, you're quite much more got the knowledge and stuff back in you as well. That probably helps too.
Definitely.
What would you say to that young girl who wants to get involved into football or into goalkeeping? What do you have any advice you would give them, or what would you say to that person?
I'd say definitely get involved. I think there is a bit of a fear with goalkeeping because it is such an unknown quantity, and I don't think there has been, there are not a lot of goalkeeper coaches out there at a sort of grassroots level and at local clubs, because I think if you've got limited resources at those kind of clubs, then I think the focus is always going to be on outfield players, because I think you're going to be getting the most for your money. You're going to have one coach who can coach 15 people rather than a coach who's only going to coach 1 or 2 people on the team. So I do understand why goalkeeping is sort of in a less fortunate position than outfield, but I would absolutely say get involved, and I think there's loads of even 5-a-side teams now, especially in London, where you can just go and goal, and it's just fun. There's no pressure. It doesn't matter if you make mistakes. It's a great place to just learn and just be yourself and just figure out if goalkeeping is actually a position that you want to go into, or actually it's definitely not for you.
Yeah, no, definitely. No, that's brilliant. And then just final thing, I know you've done a lot of work with goal diggers. Do you find you've got more access to that kind of side of opening up a space for that is available to women and non-binary people as a collective? Because quite often you get the terms the female game, and do you find that sometimes the language and the way that we approach those kind of descriptions of football can be quite limiting and can reduce accessibility for some individuals?
Yeah, I think in the women's game is quite unique in that the LGBT community in the women's game is quite there's a vast and significant number of LGBT people in the women's community, and I think that's something that everyone feels quite comfortable with. You've got LGBT and out players in the WSL, in the Championship, national level, pretty much at every level, and I've always been at clubs where the majority of players have been in the LGBT community, which is amazing. So I've always felt very comfortable in that environment. But I think clubs like Gold Diggers, where especially I think trans inclusion, I think is still one of those things that a lot of clubs aren't too sure of, or they're not sort of LGBT, or the LGB is absolutely fine, but I think clubs are still kind of getting on board with the trans women element of inclusivity and how that might look and how that might affect members and things like that. So I think Gold Diggers has been phenomenal, being at the forefront of trying to lead the way and say everyone's included. It's a safe space, it's a safe environment to come down and learn what you can and just meet people and have a good time, hopefully. So yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure to be a part of that club.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing all that, Chloe. Brilliant to have you on and hearing your side of that kind of, especially goalkeeping, because I feel that's an untouched topic sometimes. But yeah, no, brilliant. Thank you so much. And I think we're now moving on to Alistair, and I think Connor's going to head up your questions for you. Familiar face for you anyway.
Thanks a million for that, Chloe. Yeah, Alistair, I've known you for a couple of years, seeing you at some of the events that the FA have done, and your story is pretty amazing. It's a great story. Do you want to give us a little? I know usually when you do this, it's a lot longer, but tonight, if you could just give us a brief kind of 5 minutes of where your career has kind of taken you.
Yeah, well, as you know, I sort of ended my career as a 7-a-side CP footballer for players with cerebral palsy and brain injury. However, before that, I'd been a young professional playing with QPR when I left school. Signed for QPR, had a loan period at Oldham Athletic, and was lucky enough to go and play for Helmond out in the Dutch First Division. It was in 2006 when obviously my life had changed, when being that passenger in the car crash that killed my best friend Simon Patterson, the ex-Watford footballer. And after that traumatic brain injury where I was in that coma for just over 2 months and everything else, after 4 years of not playing football at all and being told that I couldn't play football because having the screws and metalwork in my head, that I was given the opportunity to play with the CP team. And it took some convincing, but I did grab the chance and did it ever since, up until I retired in 2016 now. So is that in a nutshell enough for you?
That's really good, but it doesn't. If anybody ever hears Alistair's story, he could do it really well for half an hour, and it's really interesting and stuff. Obviously, we don't have time tonight, but that is a good recap on what your amazing career's been like. Just for tonight's event, we've got a couple of questions regarding kind of the topics, and one of the things is kind of on your experience over your career. What do you think is the main barriers for people with disability getting involved in football? And what do you see the main barriers?
Well, if I could be totally honest, the main barrier for getting into disability football was its sort of promotion. Because I have to always think back, and certainly going through my recovery, that even as an ex-professional footballer, I never even knew there was disability football for anyone that suffered brain injuries and things like that. And when the doctors had told me, Alistair, you're not going to play again, and well, that was it. That was me not playing football anymore and finding other things to do. So even it wasn't even promoted so well, even though it went on in Beijing at the Paralympic Games there wasn't any sort of real signposts for me to then go on to actually take part.
And you talk about the Olympics, the Paralympics. It was an amazing time. What was the highlight of that, obviously?
Yeah, for me, London 2012, wow, the home Paralympic Games, especially from the way I think about it, sometimes I see it very differently to everyone else, because obviously my teammates were either born with cerebral palsy or had got some sort of traumatic injury. But almost 6 years to the day, funny enough, because our final game against USA was the 6th year to the day of the accident that I was involved in. And to think that only that time before that, doctors had said to me, Alistair, basically, you've got 2 choices. You can stay in a bed because you're only going to get 5 years of recovery. And I was thinking, well, if I stay in bed, then 5 years time, I'm going to be exactly the same. But I always see that time at the Paralympics was all the hard work that I put into just trying to be the best person that I could be actually, and it amounted to that. And the most amazing sort of occasion in front of your nation it really was the best thing. And scoring against Argentina there wasn't bad either, you know.
yeah, I've seen some of the footage of that, and it looked like an amazing day. You talk about, and we'll go on to the role model project in a minute, but you talk about role models. Just one question: who was a role model in your career, or big influence in your career, of any part of your career?
You're going to think I'm being super cheesy now, because in all honesty, my biggest role model has always been my mum and dad. You know, always 100%. It was funny hearing Chloe speaking just then with her legal background. My parents are solicitors, and for them it was always, for me, they always wanted me to go into the family business, and they were never really too keen on the idea of me. Now I'm going to be a footballer, like, you know. So, but again, they always stood by me no matter what I did. It was always just, as long as I was going to be happy, that's the only thing they ever wanted for me, you know.
And I think you talked previously as well about, is it Birmingham FA?
Yeah.
Been influential getting you back into the game.
Yeah, they really offered me somewhere to train and get that game time and everything else, because again, when I didn't just come straight back into CP football and play, like, you know, seamlessly. It was a lot of hard work, because body conditioning, and everyone there was already at such a high level, and one that it really gave me the impetus to want to actually strive to be as good as they were before I even got to be as good as myself. And Birmingham FA, Jazzbat over there, they gave me a stage and gave me, like, you know, a club that I could actually be at and we train with, and just, yeah, get as much game time under my belt as I could. I'm forever grateful for that.
Brilliant. Just one thing that you do at the minute, we'll go on to talk about now, is the role models projects. So basically, I'll get you to explain it better than me, but you do a lot of pre-work around the role models. Just to say what that project's about, and basically, you know, what it's doing for the disability game. Yeah,
well, you asked me a good question earlier about who my role models were, or who my inspiration was. In a footballing sense, it was always R9, Ronaldo. However, I noticed within the sort of disability football, do we ever actually provide role models for young people that are born with disability? And it's only when you look around, it's always very faceless, you know. And I actually thought, well, for any young person with a disability, okay, they might see David Beckham's, the Steven Gerrards. For them, they are great footballers. However, the reality of it, can they actually emulate their heroes? Not necessarily. And I think what's great about this role model program is there's a team of us within all the various disciplines of disability football, and we're now trying to be the faces for people that are, like, you know, have disability and can be included in the pathway to actually, well, do you know what, they have got stories that they can look at and people that they can look up to and trying to aspire to be like. And being one of those, for me, is one of the proudest things I do, because, as you know, I'm an athlete mentor by day now, where I'm in schools up and down the country, and I'm always just trying to support anyone just to actually do their best to actually achieve just their goals, whatever they may be. I'm not necessarily saying to anyone, you're going to be the next footballer, whether it's able-bodied disability football, but just whatever dream it is you have, you can actually go after it and make it possible. Yeah, definitely. I think your career is proof that, you know, your career is never over if you know, if you've got the right people around you, supporting you. You come back into the game, which is a great story. Is there any other advice you give people with a disability who've maybe had a bad experience of football and have dropped out of the game because, you know, in terms of inclusion, that they felt it wasn't the right experience? Have you got any advice for people to get back into the game? Yeah, I think one of the things that I suppose I was lucky with is I was always prepared for the challenge, because my whole recovery before that, like, you know, I thought I'd recovered to a certain extent, but then being included in disability football showed me, hang on, I've actually got quite a long way to go if I want to be who I could be. And one thing that I did notice was playing against people with disability, there's the one thing that I can do is treat it as though I'm playing against people without disability. And you actually really have to train just as hard, if not twice as hard. And it was just a sheer dedication to myself, like, you know, training Christmas Day would be going on 2 runs a day, these sorts of things, you know. And just for anyone, I say the same thing, just please try and enjoy what you're doing, you know, and give yourself a good, honest go at it. Top advice. Thanks, Alistair. Thanks a million. We will have a chance later on. There'll be questions coming in, so we'll keep you online. But I'm going to hand over to Jamal, who's going to take the next question. But thanks, Alistair. Thanks a lot.
Okay, yes, we are back. And up next, we have James Goodman. James, you available?
Sorry, microphone muted. Hello, Jamal.
Yeah, if 2020 was a movie, it'd be called You're on Mute.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are now joined by James Goodman. James is a level 4 referee who referees on the Eastern Counties Senior League, as well as the Essex Sunday Corinthian on Sunday mornings. He has been refereeing since the spring of 2013 and sees refereeing the London Senior Junior Cup final as one of his notable achievements, alongside refereeing at Wembley. Is all of that true, James?
It is. It was an empty Wembley Stadium, admittedly, but that's what it is nowadays anyway. So, yeah, it's all good.
Of course. So, yeah, if we could just, I want us to feel as if you and I are speaking one-to-one, because these are questions that I've always wanted to ask you. Of all the FA qualifications, why refereeing?
Actually, I wanted to be a referee since I was young. And I didn't start when I was old. I started when I was 23. But as you well know, looking at refereeing nowadays is there's a lot of people who join young when they're 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, who perhaps have more chance of climbing up the ladder than someone who's 23 years. You have to be very, very good to go up the ladder. And to be honest, when I was younger, my self-esteem wasn't great. And that was for various reasons, partly due to my sexuality and not feeling kind of accepted in school. So I kind of put it off for a few years. And then, as I was approaching the end of my university course, I thought, actually, I want to do something. I want to do something which I can learn from, which will challenge me. I know Chloe mentioned transferable skills, and that was something, especially when I was in for a graduate job, that I was thinking, actually, I love football. I want to get back involved with football. I've always thought about doing this since I was young. Let's give it a go. And I've not looked back since. Absolutely love it.
You are absolutely buzzing. I love the energy. That's exactly how you referee. Well, I'll tell you one thing's for sure. I think it's just over 2 years ago now, you actually came out in our referee WhatsApp group, which has to be one of the strongest acts of leadership and one of the bravest things I've ever seen one of our referees do. What made you do that, and how have you felt since?
So, I don't necessarily openly talk about my sexuality much in general, and I still say there's a lot of referees, especially ones I don't, I referee for weekends who won't know my sexuality. And that's not to say if they don't ask, I'd say, no, I'm not going to not deny it, but not be open with them about it. But it's more a decision for me that, I always say it's not something that defines me, so when I wrote a bio for this, I was very much, I'm focusing on, me as a referee, and happy to speak about my sexuality, but I've always said, look, it doesn't define me. So, I'm open when someone speaks to me about it, but it's never been something I've particularly publicised, should we say. But I do remember this conversation on our WhatsApp group, and I think it was a news story or a video where a referee had sent off a player where that player had called another player gay, or it may well be effing gay. I can't remember the exact that phrase. And then there were some referees who were saying, no, I wouldn't send them off for that. And it concerned me. It concerned me because, being a gay male, you essentially, every time you meet a new person, you have to think about the challenge of thinking, if I tell them I'm gay, are they going to judge me? And you have to do that with every single person you meet. You almost have to come out to that person every single time. It's a decision you need to make. And, I thought back to, like I said, when I was at school, I didn't necessarily feel accepted. And if there were people when there were people in school or in other walks of life who challenged open homophobia, and that includes straight people, not just gay or bisexual people, or any LGBTQ people. If it is openly challenged, that is how an open and accepting environment is created. And it worried me, the precedence that some referees didn't think about sending that player off. And I wanted to give a different perspective for them to be able to empathise that when gay is used as an insult, that, okay, some people may see it as a throwaway comment. I'm a school teacher. I still see it in school almost every week, sadly. And I do speak to my students about it and the harm it can cause, because you don't know who you're surrounded by. And even if it's being used, and in this context, it wasn't on terms of that football pitch. But even if it is being used as a throwaway comment or even a joke, that can make one person feel so uncomfortable, because that person could be living in fear, struggling to accept themselves, or being afraid to come out to their peers. So I really just wanted other people in the group to actually empathise and actually see it from a different perspective, that if that kind of thing isn't challenged, the damage it could cause.
Ladies and gentlemen, if James's response to my question doesn't highlight the importance of diversity, I don't know what is. For you to show that level of education and a different way of thinking to accommodate someone with your sexuality, that is literally the importance of diversity. And I remember that day significantly because it was a learning point for us all. That was excellent. So just to wrap up, what advice would you then give for current referees and those who may want to get into refereeing from the LGBTQ community?
A couple of things. I mean, firstly, speak with other referees and see, kind of gauge how they feel and how, you know, I'm an LGBT referee. We're going to speak to Josh in a second as well. There are other LGBT referees. I actually used to, and if there is anyone who does feel worried, speak to the FA, speak to diversity officers at the FA, and actually just kind of get a feel of things. It's up to them whether they come out or not. You know, like I said, I've never particularly openly spoke about it, and really, you know, in the WhatsApp group, it was a point where I felt actually I feel the need to. But if there are people who don't feel comfortable in football, there are other avenues. So I used to play in an LGBT football league, and there you never had that time where you felt uncertain whether if you came out, whether you were going to be judged or whether you're going to be accepted, because you always had that level of acceptance. So I think football is multifaceted, that you will be able to find people open, and to be honest, the vast majority of people are thankfully open and accepting. If someone doesn't still feel comfortable, think about LGBT football leagues, because they are fantastic as a place of feeling open and accepted. And then thirdly, if you ever do feel uncomfortable or feel discriminated against, you know, talk to someone you trust to kind of reflect over it.
Okay, James, since I've met you, you've been absolutely nothing but an asset and a credit to the London Football Association. I want to thank you so much for your time. No problem. Okay, moving on to Jordan Crichlow. Have I pronounced your name properly? Yeah. Thank you. I've had plenty of practice. So Jordan is a level 4 referee, refereeing in the Combined Counties Premier League at Supply League level after following his dad's footsteps at 16. Recently, he became the club secretary for his own Sunday League adults team, Epsom Rovers FC. He then began working for the London FA as a football services administrator after leaving his previous role with A&H International, Britain's biggest referee kit supplier. Jordan, can you join us? There you are.
I certainly can. Hello, Jamal. Can you everyone hear me?
Just making sure if we're getting too much feedback. If you want to I'll try and mute your mic.
Yeah.
And see if
Okay, can you hear me?
Can everyone still hear Jordan?
Yeah, I can hear him. Yes.
Yeah. Just double checking. So Jordan, talk us through what's it been like being a young club secretary.
It's been a really good experience, I have to say, because obviously I'm a referee and also a club secretary. I've definitely found that being a club secretary is a lot tougher than being a referee, and a lot of people probably wouldn't think that, but because I have seen both sides of the coin, I can definitely say being a club secretary, it's been good fun. There are obviously a lot of things that you have to deal with, like the training, the players, because I also coach as well. But I think to get that different perspective, you know, to be out there on a Sunday, watching the boys play, watching your friends play, and seeing some of your fellow colleagues referee, you know, it's a great feeling to kind of understand it from the players and the club's perspective, because as referees, sometimes we only see it from, you know, our point of view during the game. So sometimes what I look at during a Sunday, I can then take into my next game and go, right, if I do make this certain decision, the clubs or the players might react this way, so I know how to possibly manage it a lot better. So no, I've definitely found that being a club secretary, even at my age, has been a really good experience. It's been tough, but I've really, really enjoyed it.
I don't know if people are buying that. being a club secretary is harder than being a referee. Is that what you're telling us?
I will honestly say that, yeah, because there are so many things that you have to take into consideration. You have to take in registering all your players, getting training facilities secured, getting a home pitch secured, joining a league. There's countless things. And obviously then with players, you have to sometimes deal with attitude problems, especially if you're not doing well. You know, if you're possibly on a losing streak and players' morale is just not there, it's tough. And you have to sometimes be the person they look to for guidance. So you really kind of have to pick them up and help them, because as a referee, sometimes it's you out there on your own, and sometimes it's a lot easier to pick yourself up, but trying to actually get the morale up of your players is a lot more difficult. So I would definitely say being a referee, I've actually found it a lot easier than being a club secretary. I'm not sure if anyone else has similar views, but that's my point of view.
You've done it. I actually want to do an Instagram poll tomorrow to see what people feel about that. We should have them vote on it.
Yeah,
but listen, I mean, to be fair, you do have the necessary qualifications and experience to make that judgment. So I think, should I trust them? Oh, you know, we'll support you on that. We'll support you on that.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. So I'll be honest with you. I remember when I first met you. You know, you have a quite sort of I think the best way to describe it is exotic look, meaning that you can sort of pass for several different nationalities. So do you mind speaking about your ethnic background?
Yes. So my mum is fully English and my dad is from Barbados. And so my dad is actually a referee as well. And he's someone I've looked up to. And ever since I was in primary school, I remember in year 6, they asked us what we wanted to be when I grow up. And one of the things I said was a referee. And then obviously at the age of 16, I made that happen, which was, you know, brilliant for me to follow in his footsteps, because, you know, it seemed as if everywhere I went within our area for refereeing, you know, to meetings or to games, they would see my father and they would say, "Oh, hello, Peter, how are you?" You know, and just be so friendly with him. And I would look at it and think, wow, that's really somebody I can look up to. Because if everybody, even clubs and even players, you know, they would be so friendly with him. So I think, wow, he's got this great rapport with everybody around this area. So I think this is something I have to aspire to. And so he's just been such a great role model for me and a great inspiration to look up to. And without him, you know, I don't know whether I'd be here, whether I would be refereeing or a club secretary. I don't know what I'd be doing. So I'm really, really grateful for my father.
Jordan, you will be considered young. You're from an ethnically diverse background. It seems to be a huge rise in the amount of people from ethnically diverse backgrounds getting involved in football administration and running clubs. What do you think the impact on that is on grassroots football?
Say that again, sorry. So the impact that we have on grassroots football.
Correct.
I think it's so important. You know, without the key people, you know, the referees, the players, the people who run it, the coaches, everyone, even the groundsmen, the people who do so much for grassroots football. Without them, we wouldn't have it. You know, it's such a key part of football in England. You know, everywhere you go, you drive by, you see parks, you see young children playing, you see people watching the game, socializing. It's how you make new friends. So I think grassroots football as a whole, it's just so important for everybody. And I would really, really encourage anybody, no matter what background you come from, ethnic, sexuality, you know, get involved in anything, even, you know, playing, if not that, coaching, even refereeing. Like I say, I think refereeing is a lot easier than being a club sec. So if you're deciding whether to go into coaching or to refereeing, maybe try refereeing. You know, it's a lot easier than you might think. And there are so many support networks throughout London FA and throughout the whole of the FA. So yeah, I would just really say get involved in grassroots football as much as you can.
Thank you so much, Jordan. I think it's very interesting that we need to encourage club secretaries to take the referee course, because refereeing is the easier role of the two.
Yeah, stand by it.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, moving on, we'll be moving next to Joshua Smith. Josh, are you with us?
Hello.
Okay. Oh, the sun's still shining where Josh is. I don't know where he is. I don't know if it's Sydney or Brisbane, but it's one of these places. So Josh is a level 5 London FA referee who is openly gay. He referees in leagues across London and has also had appointments in the FA Cup, the FA Youth Cup, and the FA Vars this season. Josh, how are you? Are you well?
Good, yeah. How are you?
I'm fantastic, because the sun is shining on you.
It is. Get my tan.
First question, what's been the reaction to being an openly gay referee, and have you had to face any unexpected challenges?
So at risk of repeating some of what James said, being openly gay and everyone knowing you're gay aren't necessarily the same thing. It doesn't come up a lot in football. You can't tell if someone's gay just by looking at them. So generally people don't know until I tell them. So I guess the challenge is often being almost challenged to come out. So I gave an example to the WhatsApp group recently about when I'm warming up before a game, teams next to me warming up, one of the players didn't want to take their jumper off because they're a little bit cold. Friend on the team called him a faggot. Obviously not realising, or perhaps not caring, what the connotations of that word were and why it's so horribly offensive. And to James's previous point, you know, that there could be somebody on their team who is not out and really feeling that. And that's happened a couple of times, and I've felt the need to go over and challenge it and be like, fellas, you know, before the game, I appreciate the banter. It's between you as teammates, but you know, you just never know. And if I hear it on the pitch, you know, my cards are going to come out. And one time they were just like, don't get it, whatever. And you know, there's only so much you can do. But another time they were just genuinely devastated that, you know, that I'd called it out, and it was a great opportunity to educate them. But after that, natural next question, oh, so are you gay then, ref? And you know, the answer is yes, but not really relevant, but cool. And so I do think coming out in itself is a real challenge. It's a very vulnerable place to be when someone directly asks you a question, or when someone asks you a question that you can't answer honestly without revealing more about yourself. So, you know, oh, are you going home to the missus for your roast then? It's like, well, I'm going home, there's a roast in the oven, but it's a mister. And there's times that I will say it, and there's times where I'll just be a bit non-committal depending on how comfortable I feel. And you have to weigh it up, and no one is LGBTQ comes out once. You come out every day, time after time, to different people. I think the other challenge I wanted to mention was the lack of role models for gay people in men's football. There's a contrib level manager who's openly gay, National League referee who's openly gay, but there's no one out there in really senior top end of men's football where you can see a gay or a bi man being authentically themselves in football and thinking, yeah, that could be me.
And I know that was one incident, but overall, do you think that homophobia is quite prevalent in football? Yeah, I do. I think, to be honest, all forms of discrimination are quite prevalent in football. So, I mean, I'm aware that I'm here speaking to you as a white man. So on the privilege scale, I'm not doing too badly. And I can only really talk about my experiences in men's football. I suspect my thoughts on homophobia in football from my experiences are quite different to what, for example, Chloe described earlier, where it does seem to be less so, certainly at least in women's football. But I've been at games where there's been a player down who's been injured, and fans don't always realise how much a crunching tackle hurts and how long for. And if they're not getting up fast enough, they're a puff or a fairy. I've had the word faggot, fag, gay boy used as insults in games I've been refereeing. I have to deal with that, and I know lots of other referees have as well. I've mentioned there's no openly gay footballers in the Football League. Those that do come out do it after they retire. So I'm thinking Thomas Beattie, Robbie Rogers, Ryan Atkin, who's the openly gay referee in the National League I mentioned before. He got a death threat for being gay. There was a red card in, I think it was Tranmere against Morecambe, January, February this year, for a player calling another player a faggot. So there's definitely lots out there. I've been lucky enough not to directly experience homophobia directed at me, but it's definitely prevalent. And as I say, I talk about my experiences in men's football, and I'd be interested actually to hear potentially why Chloe thinks what Chloe thinks the reasons might be for why women's football seems to be more welcoming, more inclusive to LGBT people. And just to wrap up, what sort of impact has refereeing had on your life?
It's made me a lot more confident. It's really built my resilience. I take a lot of what I learn in refereeing into my job, as well as into day-to-day life. Keeps me relatively fit. It's good for my mental health, and as I'm sure everyone knows, mental health is a particularly big issue in the LGBT community. And getting out there and being active and talking to people regularly as part of the game has had a real benefit to me.
Josh, I would like to thank you so much for your contribution. Excellent interview as always.
Cheers, man.
Okay, moving on. We'll be moving on to Tajean Hutton. Tajean, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Who will be questioned by my esteemed colleague Aquila Burgess. Aquila, would you be doing the intro for Tajean as well?
Yep, I can do the intro for Tajean.
Yeah, and Tajean, have I pronounced your name correctly?
You have indeed, sir. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay, the floor is yours.
Very good. Thank you, Jamal. And cheers, Tajean, for coming today. So just for a bit of background for everyone, Tajean is the Grassroots Manager at Kick It Out, and he's responsible for the implementation and delivery of Kick It Out's work in grassroots football. Tajean, could you just give us a little bit more background as to your role and how you became the Grassroots Manager?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a community guy, born and raised in the London Borough of Brent. Community development and youth development is my forte, it's my passion, it's everything to me. So I've been coaching for the best part of 14 years and running in our local football club for about 7 years now. I'm at 98% of my coaching staff is black. 85% of our players are black. So I'm witnessing and experiencing firsthand the setbacks and the challenges that we face as a majority black organisation. When an opening like Kick It Out happens, you can either sit back and continue to shout from the outside, or you can get yourself involved and try to change things on the inside. So Kick It Out, I'd realised that they've done a lot of work over the past 25 years in regards to the pro game, but nothing at all within the grassroots game. So when the opportunity arose, I literally just put myself forward for it. I've been a mentor at the Raise Your Game conference for a few years, so I'd already been associated and had a relationship with quite a few of the members of staff at Kick It Out. So yeah, I've been in the role for about 3 years now. I'm still very much trying to build on our foundations about what catering for the grassroots community looks like at Kick It Out. A majority of it is trying to help county affairs as much as possible to try and implement governance a lot better than what they have been doing previously. But a vast majority of my work is trying to make sure that I'm being a voice for the grassroots sector in the boardrooms and in these executive meetings with the FA, etc., to try and be an accurate reflection of what the grassroots community actually wants and needs, rather than investing in this idea that a dictatorship is the best way to run the grassroots sector, which has been the process that we've been working under for the best part of 50 years. So yeah, it's just keeping my ear to the ground and trying to serve the grassroots community the best way that we can.
That's really interesting. And when I first started at London FA, I wasn't really aware that Kick It Out did much with the grassroots game. You always see it with the professional game, so it's great that someone's there to help support the grassroots game. Yeah. One other question I had as well was just around the Kick It Out Equality Charter for clubs and leagues. Yeah, would you just be able to just expand on that and just let us know how people can get involved?
Yeah, of course. So since I started Kick It Out, a lot of clubs have gotten in touch with the company, grassroots clubs, basically saying we want to help and we want to support in some way, shape or form. That would usually be followed by, can we have a banner, some T-shirts, some wristbands, etc. Now, from my perspective, and this is me talking as an individual who runs a football club, banners are ineffective, T-shirts are ineffective, wristbands can only take you so far. And for some reason, on the topic of race, football's response is always usually via social media campaign or with T-shirts, and I'm highly against that. So my ethos behind the Equality Charter Scheme is how can we hold football clubs accountable in their day-to-day operations. I'm not here for lip service, and lip service is what Kick It Out has played a very strong part in contributing to over the past 25 years. So the Equality Charter Scheme is basically an open statement that we require grassroots clubs to adhere to should they want to be involved with the Kick It Out campaign in some way, shape or form. So it's just a statement of intent. But through that statement of intent, we require those clubs to go through workshops and continuously update us, and we can support them in the day-to-day operations to hold them accountable. but we can't hold clubs accountable in their day-to-day operations if we don't educate them first. So it's making them understand what discrimination is, and once you've identified what discrimination is, it's how to deal with it and how to challenge it. So those are the themes that we touch on through our workshops with grassroots clubs. At the moment, we've got over 400 clubs registered, and it's our aim to make sure that we educate all 400 clubs individually, so that we can look back and say we do have a strong cohort of grassroots clubs who know how to identify discrimination, but most importantly, challenge it. Grassroots football right now is in a very, very bad way. It's a mess right now on the topic of discrimination, but I've identified change to come from the bottom up rather than from the top down. So it's just educating us as a community first, to then show the people at the top how things should really be done.
I think that's sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that kind of leads me on to another question I was going to ask, really, around, we've seen the number of racism incidents increase through professional football this season. Has Kick It Out seen that increase in the grassroots game as well?
Yeah, so prior to the first lockdown, we was already en route to exceeding the reports that we received for the entirety of last season. So we were definitely on our way within a short space of time. Some people will see that as more people reporting, or the situation getting quote unquote worse. But those of us who've been involved in grassroots football for a number of years will understand the situation is not getting worse. The situation is what it always has been, but people are now having the courage and the bravery to speak up about it, which is, there's various factors contributing as to why that's the case, but I truly believe that the tolerance for this is becoming more and more decreased over time, and people are realizing that this isn't normal. As a Black or Asian person on topic of race, you've often been told that when you've been racially abused, just get on with it. It's banter, it's football. And now we're getting to a stage now we're realizing, no, it's not just football, it's not just banter, and we can actually have a voice to speak up about it. So we've definitely seen an increase over the past, I'd say, 4 to 6 months.
Okay, so for example, if someone was going to a game this weekend, and they saw some issues of discrimination, how would they be able to report it? Is it fairly easy to do?
Yeah, it is fairly easy to do. The first thing I'd say is to make sure that the referee is aware of it. Oftentimes we see cases not work out in the complainant's favour because the referee hasn't taken any other sufficient notes within his or her reports. So making sure that the referee is aware after the game. At that point, you can either contact your local county FA or report to Kick It Out directly. I'd say this, and I'm saying this with complete and utter transparency, the benefit of reporting via Kick It Out is the whole county FA is accountable. So you may report to a county FA who may not have discrimination or EDI as one of their priorities. Therefore, the response times, for example, may be long-winded. But coming to Kick It Out directly will make sure that we hold these county FAs accountable, so that something as simple as the response time is pleasing enough to the complainant who's had the courage to speak up about it. So yeah, you can report via county FA, you can report via Kick It Out, or you can report to the FA directly.
Okay, that's brilliant, and we can put all of those notes in the end of the show notes as well. So I think that'll be really good. I suppose one other question I've got is just around, if you had a crystal ball, where would you see Kick It Out in 5 years' time? Would you think, hopefully grassroots discrimination would have gone down and you would eradicate it from the game, or do you think there's a lot that we still need to do?
I would have hoped that we would be better positioned to have more of an influence within the grassroots sector. Kick It Out is no different to any organisation working within the grassroots sector in terms of we are heavily under-resourced. And I'd like to feel that in the next 5 years, at maximum, we'll be better resourced to have more clientele and more personnel in place to give the grassroots community the service that they deserve. I don't believe that discrimination or racism will ever be eradicated from football, especially the grassroots football, because this is the English society that we live in. Grassroots football is a direct and a mirror image of what we see in British society. And collectively, we haven't gotten anywhere near to the talks of anything being eradicated, let alone in football. I just want us to be better positioned to be in a place to serve the grassroots community the best way that we can, to make sure that they do have somebody protecting them at the moment that something happens.
Okay, that's brilliant. And I think I've just seen a few of the questions come in from the chat. I know we'll go to the Q&A in a little bit, but I think everyone was just talking about education is power, isn't it? And we've had that conversation before in the past. If you can educate so many people, you will then be able to pass that knowledge on, and it will just keep snowballing, won't it?
Exactly. One of my my key themes at the moment is just educating young people. The reality and the unfortunate reality is trying to educate adults is like filling water into a bucket with a hole in the middle, because their mindset's already set. So it's going to take a lot of effort and a lot of time to try and change a mindset that's already set. Whereas young people, they still harbor a lot of innocence, so they see the world in a very innocent view. So we have to catch that little time span that we have to make sure that their ideologies are shaped in the right way. So education for me, especially amongst the youth, is the key in all of this, to make sure that the future generations see culture and society and how football should be in a different way in comparison to their parents and their grandparents' generation.
100% agree, and hopefully, you know, with the work that London FA are doing around, you know, racial equality, we've got our survey out, which I know we'll put the link to at the end of the meeting, just so people can fill in and get their thoughts. I know Kick Out are a big supporter in that, and hopefully we can come together and get an action plan which, you know, will hopefully start to eradicate it or start to lower the amount of discrimination we see at grassroots level.
Absolutely. And I do want to commend you guys. I'm not saying it just because this is a London FA event, but everybody listening, you'll be surprised to know just how much county affairs around the country aren't doing their job sufficiently, and aren't protecting the players of the grassroots sector the way they should be protected. But London FA are really setting the example here. I know it's the changes have been more intense over the past year specifically. I'm of the opinion that better late than never. So I really want to commend everybody at London FA for the work that you've started and are continuing to do, because it's really setting best practice and the example for a lot of county FAs to follow. So absolutely.
I really appreciate it, Tajean, and just so everyone knows, I didn't pay Tajean to say that before the start. I really appreciate that, Tajean. And, you know, cheers for your insight, and yeah, it's been great to hear the work that you do at Kick It Out. And I think it's over to thank you. I think it's over to Jamal now, back for the Q&As.
You 100% paid Tajean to say that, but it's fine. It's okay. We'll accept that. Tajean, I'll get in touch with you and you can tell me the complete truth about why that is. Brilliant interview, by the way. So really impressed by that. So that's fantastic. So we're now on. We do have a few Q&A. I'm sort of in the Q&A section. A few questions in the Q&A section. So I think, Shannon, would you like me to ask these questions to the panel, or do I leave that to the audience?
If you'd like to ask the ones that, so just a heads up, if you do have any questions, just pop them in the chat. But we have some that have been pre-submitted. So if you just want to, I think some of them are directed at certain individuals, but they're probably quite self-explanatory. Are you okay doing that?
Yeah, it's not a problem at all. Yeah. So I think, well, this question doesn't seem to be directed at anyone. So I think this is to all the panelists. So for those who've been interviewed, it would be nice if a couple of you can respond to this question. So we have a question here from Tracy Light. The question is, how can we increase the number of grassroots clubs offering training, opportunities, and pathways for inclusive players? So few grassroots clubs even have an inclusion section. So I think that question is to the panels. If anyone would like to answer that, how can we increase the number of grassroots clubs offering training, opportunities, and pathways for inclusive players?
If I was going to say anything on that, if I may, Jamal?
Yes, of course, yeah.
Generally, I think like any grassroots club, I remember my younger days playing for my first team, Pinner Albion, and that was all run by parents and volunteers, really. And I think it's in any grassroots environment that we do need volunteers and enough people that want to just beat that drum and actually drive with a passion to actually have an inclusive sector within a club, so to speak, and then it goes down to a resource. So I've always thought, sometimes I thought, do you know what, it would only take one sort of top football star to perhaps have a child or know someone with cerebral palsy that's affected in that way to actually really drive it, and then all of a sudden you get funding and sponsorship towards that one club, then it becomes the next big thing. And it's often quite sad thinking about it that way, because I think in all levels of football, I think it's actually a duty that all of us would have to actually, like, you know, provide that facility and that position for young people with disability to have that opportunity.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else would like to answer that question or give their thoughts? You are on mute.
No, I know.
Start a finding process for that. I think we make about £6 million each meeting, would we? Okay, go ahead, Josh.
Could replace all the sim fines, couldn't it? Just to, I mean, Alistair's spoken very eloquently. I mean, I think all I would add is perhaps a bit more promotion from the county FA on the stuff that they can do to support the clubs. I know they do absolutely loads, and this is in no way a criticism of county FAs, definitely not London. But there's loads of resources out there that perhaps could be pushed further to clubs. I know a few clubs who are actually really keen to do more of this, but aren't sure where to start, and more signposting and more high profile of it is never a bad thing.
Okay, thank you, Alistair. Thank you, Josh. We'll move on to the next question. Once again, aimed at all of the panelists. This question is from Antonio Bruma. What is the reason you are involved in football? So if any of our panelists would like to answer that question, what is the reason why you are involved with football?
Again, I can jump straight in on that. Do you know what, for me, football, wow, it gave me everything, because not many people know I was actually born in Belgium, okay? And then as a youngster, my parents sent me to live in Dominica with my grandma while my mum was graduating from Oxford. And she only brought me to England at 4 years old. And now we have to remember now, Dominica, the country that I've just come from in the Caribbean, has a population of 60,000 people. It was watching Liverpool play Portsmouth with my dad. I saw John Barnes, his free kick hit the post, Jan Welby scored the follow-up, and then I saw the whole stadium go crazy. Now, for that 4-year-old at the time, I just saw a guy kick a ball in the back of the net, and he made more people than the country that I've just come from just start going crazy, kissing each other. And I couldn't understand how doing that like sort of triggered that reaction. I asked my dad what they were doing. He's like, Alistair, they're playing football. And almost from that moment, I said to myself, do you know what? I want to be able to have that power to make that many people act like that. And for me, that's where it started, and I've never ever forgotten that moment, and it's been with me, well, all my life, really.
Powerful. Anyone else would like to answer that question?
Yeah, I'll just jump in there. I start by highlighting one of my pet peeves as a football coach. One of my pet peeves is the occasional parent who turns up to a football game and decides to stand behind me as a coach and starts to talk about what they feel the tactics should be. Oh no, I think you should play him up front, or I think you should put 3 in the back. And my immediate response is, okay, come along on Saturday, come to a training session and get involved, and then you can be involved in the tactical side of things. Very, very similar to that my ideology of the football industry. You can be that parent on the sideline who keeps talking and giving commentary about what's currently going wrong in the football industry, or you can be a football coach and put your jacket on and actually get involved firsthand. As a black person, I understand firsthand all the things that are going wrong within the football industry and how we're not being catered for. I could be a parent on the sideline and give commentary on Twitter and Facebook about what people aren't doing, or I can get involved directly and try and influence it from the inside. And that's for me in a nutshell, the reasons why I'm involved in the football industry at the moment.
Tajean Hutton, TH. Okay, them powerful answers. All right. Jesus. I mean, what can we say to that? Okay, so the next question is from Tracy Light. Once again, open to all the panelists. The question is, how can we encourage more clubs to offer inclusive football for players with disabilities? And also, how can we create more pathways for inclusive players to develop their football and or coaching? Would anyone like to tackle that question?
Sorry, could you repeat the question, please?
Sure. The question is twofold. How can we encourage more clubs to offer inclusive football for players with disabilities? And how can we create more pathways for inclusive players to develop their football and or coaching?
That's interesting, because we know we've got disability coaching badges and events on, but I just find just sport in general, certainly grassroots sport in general, tends to be a numbers game, and clubs won't necessarily want to put on inclusive football for just 1 or 2, especially when we've got the whole insurance aspect of things in the health and safety. Well, can we integrate them into what we're doing? Is it going to be safe? Do we get parent approval, etc., etc.? And I'm a little bit stumped on how we actually sort of smooth that over to accommodate it. But that's what I'd have been signposting everyone to you. Like, what are we going to do?
Cheeky Alistair. Would anyone else like to tackle that question? Okay, moving on to did Tajean come in? Tajean?
Yeah, I'll jump in there
okay.
very quickly.
Okay, everyone get ready. Tajean is about to give another powerful response.
Don't be silly.
Okay, all right.
Don't be silly. From my experience, my overlook is to try and be realistic about what we expect from grassroots clubs. Right now, I don't think there's any words to describe or to fully comprehend just how under-resourced grassroots clubs are in this country right now. And I know a lot of grassroots clubs have the intention to try and facilitate for a lot more inclusivity within their environments or within the community that they serve. They just don't have the resources to cater for it. That could be in way of coaches, that could be in way of volunteers, or just the facilities that they may or may not have. So for me, the answer is, again, and a lot of the issues that we face within grassroots football always boils down to the lack of resources that we have to cater for the things that we know should exist. So in this response, resources is one of the main answers here. The moment that a club will have an increase in the funds they have available and the facilities that they have at their expenditure or at their expense, I think you will see a lot more activity in the area of inclusivity. As it stands, a lot of grassroots clubs are taking what they get right now, especially in terms of volunteers, because the climate of grassroots football right now just isn't in the best of ways. But I do believe that the moment we see an increase in resources, we'll see an increase in activity, personally.
You are clearly a person who knows what they're speaking about. Okay, this next question might actually touched on something that you mentioned earlier, Tajean, but once again, it's open to the panel. Okay, this question is from Simon Barlow. How do you handle feedback and analysis in the age of social media? See, Tajean's giggling. Okay, well, we know what that means. Here we go, everyone. Brace yourselves.
I didn't want to go first. Does anybody want to go first?
Tajean, go ahead. Come on. You know you want to. Go ahead.
Now, I can only speak from a kick it out standpoint at this point. One thing I would say is we're living in a time where people speaking in unison is becoming more and more common because of social media. And we like to brand that as trending topics or waves of just people speaking the exact same thing. It's so important for corporate entities, and I'm putting kick it out in that bubble as well, the FA, the PFA, county FAs, to be vulnerable and open to criticism, because at that point you're being cohesive with what the people want. Football for so long, especially within the grassroots sector, has run off of a dictatorship. And the reasons why that has been allowed to continue is because people in their entirety haven't been given a voice to express themselves in the public domain. Now that public domain is available to any Tom, Dick and Harry, it's an opportunity for corporate organizations to take in those opinions and to adjust the operational daily activity in accordance with what the people are saying. Has that been the case? Absolutely not. But from a kick it out standpoint, where I'm definitely pushing for us to get to a place where when people are critical of kick it out, in many ways it's justified, we have to take that on board and adjust what we're doing in accordance to that. The moment that we maintain a level of stubbornness or pride within the football industry, there won't be any tangible change. So for me, that is a brilliant question, and it's something that the football industry hasn't embraced enough in terms of the opinions of the public.
Okay, that's this MP Tajean Hutton there. Okay, I hear you. Would anyone else want to offer a response as well? I think we have a hand raised. Is that Amanda? Or AL? Who's AL here? I'm not sure.
No, it's just a couple of questions for when you finished. A couple of questions from the chat.
Okay. 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 No problem. Anyone else would like to answer how you handle feedback and analysis in the age of social media. I think people hear social media in the question and they're like, whoa, wait a second, you know, unless you're Tajean, of course. It's like, yeah, right.
I'll jump on with you there. You know what? Social media just magnifies everything that I've been taught as a youngster growing up playing, certainly when it's around performance. And for me, football, I was always told football is just a game of opinion, Alistair. And like, you know, where one manager wouldn't like you, one person might not like you, you may find someone that does. And I think the social media, well, all we're trying to do is adapt to whether it's 1, 2, 3, 400,000 different opinions. And I've always thought that, like, you know, I can be perfectly honest with myself, like, you know, and it's the feeling that I've always had, like, you know, so if I've got a feeling where, do you know what, I did all right, then I wouldn't care less what anyone says, what anyone's written down, because I've got enough conviction in how I've made myself feel. Whereas if I have been doing badly and they're saying I've been doing badly, I'll probably help them out and give them some more firepower with that one. So I always just let it glide off me.
Okay.
Mark, and happy to add something if you want as well.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
I mean, yeah, just thinking what's been said, kind of, as a referee, from that perspective, you can go, and probably as a player, anyone in football can log into social media and they can find a whole range of comments about them. And I think it's ultimately, I got to a point where I was looking at games where I thought I'd made a bad decision, or I'd go on Twitter and search my name and see kind of what comments I find. And I think you've got to think from a mental health standpoint about kind of you know, kind of how much you want to listen to these people. I think social media companies do just need to do so much more. That's obviously a discussion in the media at the moment. And hopefully, obviously the Premier League clubs and a lot of the big sporting companies and broadcasters are doing a boycott this weekend. But I mean, for me, from a personal level, I got to a point where I thought, well, actually, how much do I care about what other people's opinions of me are on social media? For me, I just felt it will get you down more often than not, sadly. And at this point, I just stopped searching for feedback on social media myself. But hopefully, like we say, hopefully there can be a culture change. But I think it's a wider societal issue as well. It is the Wild West at times.
I think that is very, very fruitful to hear your response to that question in regards to that. I think people always say, oh, you know, ignore social media or ignore the press for any potential feedback on your performance. But sometimes it's quite difficult to when it's literally on your fingertips and you can have that information. But it's interesting to see how that sort of impacted you. So really interesting. Okay, Amanda, I currently don't have access to the chat due to technical difficulties. Are you able to ask the questions in the chat to the panel?
Yeah, no problem. We've got a question from Alistair Potter. A question particularly for Josh, James and Chloe, although I think Chloe's had to drop off. So for Josh and James, why do they think men's football is a less accepting place for LGBTQ individuals than women's football? And what would it take, both individually and organisationally, to change that?
I'll have a go. I mean, from my experience, women's football, which is very limited, I've definitely observed less laddie banter. I've observed a more diverse fan base, and I've observed an overall friendlier environment. Beyond that, it's really hard to say. I was really interested in what Chloe might have thought, and it's such a real shame that they had to drop off. But it's really difficult. I mean, on the second point, in terms of what needs to change institutionally, it's a societal thing. I can't remember who said it already, but grassroots football is essentially a reflected representation of wider society. And for as long as we've got discrimination of any type in society, we're going to see it in football as well. So I think it's really important that everyone in football, whether you're a coach, a spectator, a player, a referee, when they see it, hear it, they call it out, and just remind people what is and isn't acceptable, and how the language, attitudes, and any other way in which discrimination is manifested affects real people.
Yeah, I think that's really valid points, and it's been mentioned in the chat throughout the evening. You know, education is the key, and getting that sideline support, getting people to join in with the message, and you know, providing that allyship is the key, I think. Yeah, thanks for that. So, unless James wants to jump in with any further comments, Yep.
I'll briefly add. You know, I do think it's societal wider. I don't just think it's in football where it's less accepting. I think across society there's almost like hyper masculinity where there perhaps is less acceptance in terms of homosexuality amongst men. Certainly what I see in schools, and that's just my teacher background. But again, you know, just to reiterate, it is education. You know, unfortunately, you know, one thing I'd say is, you know, when I've seen homophobia on the football field, it often has to be me who challenges it. You know, what I'd like to see as a point is when anyone sees any kind of discrimination, that it shouldn't have to be the victim who challenges it. It should be the peers. It should be, and if your offender says something, it just creates a culture of being challenged. And I think once that culture is achieved, then hopefully it can be an even playing field. But I do think it's partly a wider societal issue as well.
Can I just add a little bit more, actually, because I realise that we haven't really talked much about the T and LGBT trans, and I think it goes back to other points again around resourcing. But there are very few clubs in London that I'm aware of where you can be a trans person and play in the team and feel accepted. So there's a few teams in the league that James mentioned before. So I'm thinking of the London Unity League, where they have teams with both genders, and I know it's another debate, but that comes down to thinking sometimes beyond how things are currently done. I think they're affiliated to AFA, who are taking on this league as a trial without gender-specific football, and it's working really well. But we talk a lot about homophobia, and I just want to touch on the point that there is definitely transphobia in football as well, and it can be a very difficult place to be trans or non-binary or any other sort of not cisgender heterosexual.
Yeah, true. Good points. Okay, thanks. One more question we've got from Anthony Singh. He says his family are from Guyana but were born in London. He's a new goalkeeper assistant coach at Pro Touch Soccer Academy. If there's a piece of advice you could give me on how I coach kids of all nationalities and backgrounds, what would it be? He says he relates it to being a very lonely position. So is there anybody that would like to come in on that one? It's a bit of a shame that Chloe's gone off, actually, because it's a bit more goalkeeper specific, but anybody that's got any coaching experience. Alistair, would you like to come in?
Yeah, I was going to say, well, me just remembering me as that young person, why did I keep going back to football training? And it's just because the management and coaches were so infectious, and their love of being there with us, teaching us all the techniques is what, like, you know, infused me and my teammates at the time. So I think just let your personality shine through and really just play on that enjoyment of the game. Yeah,
that's great. Thanks. Thank you, Alistair. Some really good comments, really good discussions going on in the chat. Just scrolling through, don't think we've got any more specific questions, just going through to the end.
I can jump in there, Amanda, because I've just seen one on the form, which was actually sent through by Theo, who's been very good on the chat, sharing some really good stuff. Probably for you, Alistair, it's what is the future looking like for disability football in the next 5 years? I know that's quite a big one, but like in your role, you'll probably know much more about that.
Yeah, do you know what? I'll say, well, pre-COVID and everything else, and going back maybe three years now, it was looking very bright because we've done well at the World Championships, and like with it was Tokyo, which would have been coming up, and because I can only speak on CP football, like, you know, and all the paperwork that had to go through the sport wasn't going to be included because someone had forgot to submit a form at the right time. So then there was the allocation for Paris coming up, and the Paralympic Games has always been the real showpiece for it, like, you know. And I think certainly at board level, it needs to be taken, like, you know, with the highest respect, because we've got clubs. Because when we look at all the best nations, the Russias, the Ukraine, and Brazil, they're all full-time in their disability sport. And, well, that's a no-brainer, you know. When you're prepared to put in that commitment to it, well, you will do well. And I think it needs a little bit of faith from, I won't say you guys as such, but certainly the FA, we need to get behind it and take it seriously, because we do have the talent. And it's only when I'm at the various disability football hubs up and down the country. I was last at Brighton's, and they have got some fantastic players, both male and female. And I can see we've got talent in abundance in this country. And I just think we need to say, do you know what? We're going to have a push. We're going to make the investment, and let's, even if we just show that it's a big promotion push and we're going for it. So fingers crossed. I'll keep beating the drum, and 5 years time you'll see me on every corner talking about disability football.
It's brilliant. And just another quick one. So obviously COVID has really impacted disability football in a disproportionate way.
Yes.
What would you say, like, hopefully coming out of the side of it, what could clubs be doing to offer that extra hand to get more disabled people involved in football again? Because obviously I think quite a lot of people have been put off it almost.
Yeah, I think any opportunity that you're going to provide for an able-bodied person, why haven't you second-guessed yourself and asked yourself, have I provided this for someone without a disability? Am I being discriminatory? Because the bottom line is you would be, like, you know. And sometimes we so often think that there's nothing wrong with just having people within an environment, like, you know, whether it's, okay, you can't take part and necessarily play because it's not safe today, but do you know what? You can, like, you know, coach, you could referee, you could be a part of the camaraderie and the whole fraternity that we have here. So it's and that's how we grow any club, really. So I do think that there needs to be that sort of second guessing of ourselves.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. I don't know if there's any more questions, or Jamal, do you want to have a wrap up of the evening? Am I talking to the abyss?
You know, I can hear you. I want to thank everyone, all the panelists. The panelists have been absolutely excellent. I think everyone would agree on that. Also want to thank my esteemed colleagues for setting up this amazing event. And I think we should definitely be doing one of these soon again, shouldn't we? How do we feel about that? Should we do that again? Yeah. Yeah, I can hear everyone saying yes, even though they're all on mute. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I want to give a massive thank you to all of our panelists from the top: Chloe Morgan, Alistair Heselton, James Goodman, Jordan Crichlow, Josh Smith, Tajean Hutton. I want to thank you all. I want to thank Shannon Heiner, Conor McBritty. I want to thank myself as well. Jordan, you had a piece in this as well. And Aquila Burgess and Amanda Lewis, all helping to put on this fantastic event. I want to thank everyone. I hope everyone enjoys the evening. Thank you so much for joining a conversation with London FA, creating an inclusive environment. Have a good night.
Thank you very much.